Great. Good morning, everybody. Good morning in the room and on the camera. My name is Michael Oso. I'm the president and CEO of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. We are thrilled to have you all with us this morning. And I'm going to just start us off and quickly turn it over to the main attraction for the day. But I do want to give everybody just a little bit of context this morning. So I'm just going to take us through a few slides and help you understand about the organization and about the diseases. So for starters, there are estimated more than 3 million Americans living with Crohn's or colitis. And it's important to know that anyone can be affected by the diseases. So regardless of age or gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, these diseases affect people coming from all walks of life and of all ages. The other thing that's important to know is that patients are not just physically affected by these diseases. There is a mental and an emotional impact of these diseases, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. And they're individual, these diseases, and often invisible. So many people, and you're going to hear from patients today, talk about this specifically. It's unclear to people that patients are battling either Crohn's or colitis. It is often invisible, even to people who are closest to our patients. Most frequently, people are diagnosed between the ages of 15 and 35. And this is a not commonly known statistic, and it's important for us to help you all understand it. As I said, people can be affected by the disease at any age, but most frequently they're originally diagnosed between the ages of 15 and 35. And again, you're going to hear from patients who have had exactly that experience. The median age for diagnosis for ulcerative colitis is 34.9 years, and for Crohn's is 29.5 years old. The other thing that's important, sorry, let me go back for a second. We're excited to be hosting this event today because we're about to begin Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Week. It happens every year between December 1st and December 7th. And it's a terrific opportunity for us to build awareness for the diseases in general, and having you all here today is a great first foray this year into that endeavor. So thank you for helping us do that. This morning we're going to focus specifically on the impact of the diseases in young people in this very first session. The people that you're going to hear from today are Will Laddier, who's on the right, and Stephanie Hughes, who's on the left. They're both in the room with us this morning. Thank you for being here. Welcome. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about each of them because they're going to talk a lot more about their actual stories. So Will is an ulcerative colitis patient, and he was diagnosed in 2005. He is a fitness instructor, and so Will is a very good example of someone who often doesn't look like he's battling a disease, but I can tell you that he has been struggling with the disease for over a decade. Not only does he have ulcerative colitis, but he was also diagnosed with colon cancer at age 28, and that resulted in the removal of his colon. Stephanie is a married mom of two. You'll see her toast on the screen. She was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and Stephanie was 13 years old when she was diagnosed. She also had her colon removed in 2012 and was given a permanent ostomy. And she's going to share her story about her disease journey and being a mom and living with ostomy. But first, I want to introduce two other people that are going to speak to you this morning before you hear from our patients. The first is Dr. Brent Polk. Thank you, Brent, for being with us this morning. Brent has the distinction of being the chair of our National Scientific Advisory Committee. This is a group of 200 volunteers, researchers, and healthcare professionals from all across the country that come together as a full group and in committee to help guide the activities of the organization and the mission activities specifically, our research efforts, our education support, and advocacy. He is also the professor of pediatrics and biochemistry and molecular medicine at the Keck School of Medicine of USC. And Dr. Polk he's going to provide an overview of IBD for us all today, and specifically the challenges for young adult patients. So, thank you. The second person you're going to hear from is Laura Wingate. Laura is the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation's Senior Vice President of Education, Support, and Advocacy, and in that role, she oversees all those activities. She's going to talk specifically about the psychosocial impact of these diseases and specifically on young adults. I just want to remind everybody that, I'm sorry, I forgot the next slide. They're on the screen. That would have been easier. That's Dr. Brendbold. I am Laura Wingate. There's going to be time for question and answers for sure. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Thank you, Michael, and I want to add my thanks and welcome to everyone being here today to help us get out the message about this important disease that impacts more than 3 million Americans. As Michael pointed out, I'm a pediatric gastroenterologist, and so I get to see, as a clinician, children who are diagnosed with this disease shortly after birth, all the way up to 21 years of age, and as much as 20% of individuals present during that window of time. So let's talk a little bit about what Crohn's and ulcerative colitis are. These are, first of all, the two names for the inflammatory bowel diseases that we're talking about. They affect both of them the gastrointestinal tract. For ulcerative colitis, it's restricted to the colon, the types of intestinal inflammation that occur. And for Crohn's disease, it can be anywhere in the gastrointestinal tract, from the mouth to the anus. So both of those diseases affect the GI tract. The ulcerative colitis is restricted to the colon. Some of the features that clinicians see and that cause symptoms in patients are inflammation or swelling, irritation in the gastrointestinal tract, ulceration, so loss of that lining of the intestine, and potentially fibrosis or scarring to the intestine. And all of these create symptoms for patients. Those types of symptoms can be diarrhea, abdominal pain, rectal bleeding, urgency. Many of my patients tell me they have to, the first thing they do when they arrive in a new location is figure out where the bathroom is, so that they can be aware and feel more comfortable in their environment. Patients can also experience disease complications outside the gastrointestinal tract. As much as 2/3 of patients at some time have an experience of symptoms somewhere else in the body. That could be arthritis or joint pain. It can be weight loss or malnutrition. It can be anxiety, depression, and sleep disturbance, and we'll hear more about that from Laura after I talk. But those symptoms can occur, again, as much as 2/3 of individuals, and sometimes end up being the more symptomatic complication and more difficult to treat. Patients are at increased risk for developing colorectal carcinoma, as we just heard in Will's story, and here more. And in general, that begins after about 10 years of diagnosis, but in some patients can begin within 3 to 5 years following their diagnosis. Crohn's disease, for most patients, affects the end of the small intestine and the beginning of the colon. And as I already indicated, ulcerative colitis affects the entire colon. There have been a lot of advances in the last decade in understanding the causes of inflammatory bowel disease. Unfortunately, we have no cures. The foundation is working and supporting research looking for those cures. But to date, we don't have a cure. We do know that it involves multiple factors. Those are shown on the screen. From genetics, there's an increased risk if you have a first-degree relative of having ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. So for parents, your child child has an increased risk of developing inflammatory bowel disease, but that's not sufficient. Even identical twins, the difference may be as much as only 1 out of 3 identical twins, so you see both twins with disease. So genetics is not sufficient, but it's important in causing the diseases. We know that there's an overactive immune response. In fact, all of our current medications are targeted at reducing that immune response, but that alone is not sufficient to cause disease. We know that the environment is involved, and there are a number of environmental factors. So one risk is decreased access to sunlight and vitamin D deficiency. So environmental exposure and having access to sunlight seem to be important in developing the disease for some patients. And lastly, we know that the microbiome is involved. So you have all been either writing about the microbiome in your articles or certainly hearing about it in the news almost on a weekly basis. But the bacteria that occupy human bodies, which there are about 10 times more bacteria than there are cells in the body, and those microbiome components tend to be important, seem to be very important in causing inflammatory bowel disease. The rates of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis are about the same for men and women, although there's a slightly higher risk of ulcerative colitis or prevalence of ulcerative colitis in men. Treatment options that we have induce remission, help patients manage symptoms, but don't cause cures. So patients want to be in remission where their disease is not active, and we want to help deliver a cure so they don't have disease. There aren't standard treatment regimens for patients. So an example for diabetes, we know that we want to control patients' insulin levels and give them adequate insulin to reduce their glucose. We don't have a specific treatment target for inflammatory bowel disease like this, nor do we have a single drug that creates that. So patient treatments tend to be individualized. There are regular types of medications that reduce inflammation that we start patients on at their diagnosis, and essentially wait to see if they're going to respond or not. And that time period can be anywhere from 3 months to 2 years before we see a response. And sometimes more than half of the patients never go into remission. So the need for better medications is really important for our patients. Medications may not adequately control the symptoms, and some patients have preferences that also influence that. Some of our medications are given intravenously, some are given as injections, and others are oral medications. There is a high risk for surgery for patients with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. As much as a third of patients with ulcerative colitis will require a removal of their colon at some point during their life. As much as 2/3 of patients with Crohn's disease will have some type of surgery during their life with the disease. And different types of surgeries may need to be performed. Sometimes patients with Crohn's disease develop obstructions and blockages, and those have to be treated surgically. And for ulcerative colitis patients, indication may be that a patient never goes into remission and continues to be malnourished and require a lot of medications for symptoms and prefer to have their colon removed rather than continue with the symptoms. In other cases, it may be development of dysplasia or early signs of cancer or the development of frank cancer that results in to remove the colon. For ulcerative colitis, removing the colon is curative for the colitis. It doesn't necessarily prevent some of the other systemic problems that can occur in the liver or the joints, such as arthritis or primary sclerosing cholangitis is the name of the liver disease. And for patients with Crohn's disease, following surgery, as much as a third of them will have recurrence of their symptoms within 3 years of their surgery. So for Crohn's disease, surgery doesn't tend to be curative. So I'll move on to talking about some of the specifics for young adults with inflammatory bowel disease. They face unique challenges. The disease can have impact on growth, nutrition, sensation of body image and wellness. And again, we'll hear more about things such as sleep disturbance and depression. In young women, symptoms tend to be worse during the menstrual period. And a percentage of women experience difficulty becoming pregnant, particularly following surgery. Patients are advised when they're having a flare or having active disease not to become pregnant because pregnancy tends to reduce some of the normal immune responses and seems to aggravate inflammatory bowel disease. Women during periods of remission seem to have the same fertility rate and ability to get pregnant as women without these diseases. But as you've heard in general, that can sometimes be a very narrow window for patients achieving remission and staying in remission. There's also a concern about, during pregnancy, the types of medications that patients are required to stay in remission, what the impact might be on the unborn child. These are generally managed with the gastroenterologist and the obstetrician, and best served when pregnancies are planned and are working on the types of medications that will keep a woman in remission during her pregnancy. For young men, fertility issues have been a concern. Both the disease and the medications can affect libido and sexual activity. And some of the surgical effects, treating ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease can also have effects on body image or changes from scarring or complications of the surgery, and also affect libido and sexual activity. So I've given you a general overview of the diseases, and now I'll ask Laura Wingate to update us on some of the psychosocial and psychological impact of the disease.
Thank you, Dr. Polk, and thank you all for being here. I'd like to also share my gratitude for you joining us today. So I'm just going to jump right in because you heard from Michael and Dr. Polk that Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are often invisible diseases, and I think the image here of an iceberg is really a great way to express this invisibility. An iceberg, you only see the tip of it, but we all know that there's a lot going on underneath, and that's very similar to what happens with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Patients are experiencing a number of symptoms that aren't visible to their friends, their family, the general public. Those can include side effects from medications, the chronic pain they experience with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, the fatigue, which has been mentioned, but there's also food anxiety, fear of going out and having dinner with friends and family, which can lead to them missing events and having a great impact on their social life and intimate relationships. There's also the financial concerns of the medications, the doctor visits, which are weighing on the patient and causing that stress and anxiety that Dr. Polk mentioned. we've all alluded to in the previous talks about relationship issues. I'm going to go into a little more depth on that. And then there's the parenting concerns, which Stephanie's going to share her story about. That as someone with a chronic illness, being a parent is hard to begin with. Add a chronic illness, one that has all of these symptoms, it's even harder. And then there's the fear of the future that comes with having a chronic illness, knowing, as Dr. Pope mentioned, that some medications might not work, and what that experience is for the patient can create anxiety. So I hope you'll keep this image in mind as we continue to discuss the experience of inflammatory bowel disease on psychosocial health. So in young adults, it was mentioned earlier that there's body image dissatisfaction, and individuals with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis often experience higher levels of anxiety and depression. There's feelings of shame and low self-worth because the disease itself has the extraintestinal manifestation of the arthritis, the joint pain, et cetera, that are expressed, but also that they're having a chronic illness. They might be losing weight. They might be malnourished, and this all leads to that dissatisfaction with their body image, which ultimately leads to an impaired quality of life. I already mentioned that the people with IBD often miss appointments with friends and families because of the impact of the disease. Women have a perceived greater impact of the lower self-esteem and the lower body image. This comes from the struggles with pregnancy that Dr. Polk already mentioned, but also the attractiveness issues and the impact of the disease on body weight, or the impact of the medications on image, like steroids causing swelling, and that all goes into that feeling of attractiveness that we all want when we're having intimate relationships with our friends and partners. And also there's the isolation that's experienced by having a chronic illness, one that can be debilitating, that keeps you at home, that keeps you away from your friends and family. And ultimately, many patients experience malnutrition. I will pause.
Wrong number, I think.
As I was saying, can experience malnutrition as a result of their disease, and also the weight loss that goes with that, and that can also impact body image. We mentioned intimacy before, and the disease activity, and Dr. Polk mentioned the impact of menstruation and pregnancy and fertility issues, but I want to go a little bit deeper in that the disease activity, because it can create depression, anxiety, and fear, can also impact sexual function. 40% of IBD patients believe that the disease itself has fermented intimate relationships, those with their partners and husbands, wives, spouses. 34% believe the disease has affected the end of their relationship, so actually caused them to lose a partner or spouse because of the disease, the journey that they're going on, the financial impact, all that we've talked about. And 40 to 66% of women and 44% of men with IBD report difficulties in some aspects of the sexual experience. And that's concerning. We already know that this disease has such a profound impact on the body image and the disease experience itself, and then it also is impacting the intimate relationships and the sexual function. So this is something that the foundation is very concerned about, and we appreciate you being here to bring this to light to our audience. In particular, the LGBTQ community has an even greater impact. So gender identity and sexual orientations are neglected in our healthcare system right now in general, but it's also a neglected area of research in the IBD field. The LGBTQ community is poorly supported in their health interactions. Many healthcare providers are uncomfortable talking about the issues that make unique to this community. There's negative experience in accessing providers and healthcare that can address unique needs and the conversations that need to be had to discuss the impacts of the psychosocial health on the LGBTQ community. And in particular, gay and bisexual men with IBD require precise information about sexual activity and relationships that's not currently being provided by our healthcare system. So what is the foundation doing about all of this? So one of the things that we're doing is we are working to create resources to support the patient and the caregivers and the family members in this area of psychosocial health. And the first step that we took was to bring a group of patients together to discuss coping and what they want from their providers and the resources from the foundation. So we conducted a series of focus groups in New York and Philadelphia. And one of the key findings we found was that patients want to discuss the emotional aspects, the mental health aspects of their disease with their provider, even if they're in remission, even if right now their symptoms aren't flaring or causing a huge impact on their life. They want to have these conversations. Patients also understood that it is important to manage their emotional health, that this was a key component of the experience with inflammatory bowel disease, and that patients want help and they seek support from their family, from their friends, and from supportive communities. So we were able to validate that there's a need and that we need to help fulfill that need for the inflammatory bowel disease community. Another key aspect of supporting the patient and ensuring they have the resources needed to support their mental and emotional health is really encouraging patients and providers to engage in shared decision-making. And when we talk about shared decision-making, we're really talking about the proactive discussion between a patient and their provider around their treatment options, but not just the options that are available, also their preferences and lifestyle considerations, so that we're finding the right treatment for that patient that's going to keep them on their medication for as long as possible and adherent to the protocol that will keep them in remission and put their disease into remission. So we are, as the foundation, are really working to encourage that open dialogue between patients and their providers to make informed decisions about the best course of treatment, and also when to seek the help of mental health professionals that have expertise in supporting those with chronic illness. There are times when the stress and anxiety and depression need intervention beyond the family, friends, and support that the communities we have can provide. So being able to have that dialogue with the healthcare provider is essential. So I wanted to just highlight a few of the resources this foundation has to support the psychosocial health. We have a peer program called Power of Two, where individuals who want to speak one-on-one with another patient who's walked in their shoes can reach out to our IBD Health Center and receive a peer match based on the criteria that they want to talk about. So I always give the example of a young person, maybe 18 years old or entering college, that wants to speak to another ulcerative colitis patient that has entered colleges and the challenge that they've gone through, or a young mother who is just had her first child and wants to speak to another mother about managing motherhood, a chronic disease, and get that peer-to-peer perspective. The IBD Health Center is a program that we have master's trained healthcare professionals who are here to answer patient, caregiver, and even provider questions Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And the specialists in the IBD Health Center really can answer everything from what is Crohn's disease, what is ulcerative colitis, to what financial resources are available, what support programs are available, where can I find the mental health professionals that can help me, and how do I talk to my provider about these issues that are impacting my life. So there are a wealth of information, and I always encourage patients and caregivers to reach out to us. Later this month, very soon, in December, we're going to be launching a whole suite of resources that will focus in on anxiety, depression, and stress, and how it relates to inflammatory bowel disease. It will also include the research that we're doing in this area so that patients are aware that not only is the foundation wanting to support them now, we're wanting to understand the impact of stress and anxiety and depression on the patient community. So more to come on those resources, which will launch in December. And we have an online community which is moderated by our IBD Health Center, so no question that's posted in the community is left unanswered. But this is a closed patient community where individuals can join, they can post questions, get responses from other patients. There are forums for men and women and caregivers. We also host online support groups as a community. So this is another way that individuals who want to engage in that open dialogue with others can engage with the foundation in a safe, protected space that doesn't put their information out on Facebook, but in a closed IBD-specific community. And now I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie Hughes to share her story.
As you mentioned, I'm Stephanie. I was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease when I was 13. Although I really started experiencing symptoms a couple of years before that, weight loss, bloody stool, fatigue. And my primary care doctor suspected it might be Crohn's disease, but honestly, nobody really seemed that concerned about it at the time. I was never referred on to a GI specialist at that moment. And one of my grandfathers actually had Crohn's disease, so it was a term that we were at least somewhat familiar with. Although, as far as my mom was aware, he had simply taken a medication and that had managed it. We sort of figured it would be the same for me. But unfortunately, he had passed at this time, so we couldn't ask him about it. So we actually spoke to a nutritionist friend who shifted me over to a completely whole foods diet, supplements, and my symptoms went away. So we thought we kind of found the key to managing it. But I remember the summer before 8th grade is when I started to feel a little bit more run down and the symptoms started to return. And by September of 1999, I was no longer able to attend school. I was just feeling so sick and weak. And began seeing a GI physician then. But he wanted to try out for a few weeks of medication to see if that would help before referring me on to a more specialized pediatric IBD specialist. But we would soon realize the mistake in taking that advice. And over the next 4 weeks, I lost a third of my body weight. I dropped down to just 50 pounds. I started blacking out, one time almost falling down the stairs in the middle of the night. My mom was constantly fielding questions from others who were concerned that I had an eating disorder. We finally did get the referral to one of the top GIs in the area, and I remember arriving at the office and I couldn't even walk down the hall to get to his door. And he basically took one look at me and said, "We need to get her hospitalized and get a blood transfusion." And this next part always stuck with me because I remember my mom wanted to donate her blood to be used for the transfusion. And he said to her that it takes a couple of days to process any blood donations, and quite simply, I did not have a couple of days. So I spent the next 4 weeks in the hospital. I was fed through an IV and treated with more powerful options than what I had been given before. And then I had my first colonoscopy and got the official diagnosis of Crohn's disease. So especially at a young age, I look back now and more clearly see all the different impacts that it's had on my life beyond just the symptoms that I was dealing with. This all happened close to Halloween time, and I remember a particular moment before going in the hospital that I was looking in the mirror and started crying, and I said to my mom that at least I wouldn't need a Halloween mask that year because I was so sunk in and very skeletal at the time. She talks all the time about how large all of my knees and elbows looked because everything else was so small. And I don't have any pictures of myself during that time, mostly because I wouldn't allow them to be taken. This one that you can see of me here in the hospital was taken when I was about to go home. So this was after having been there for 4 weeks and being treated during that time. And then the one next to it with my sister's was taken just a couple of weeks later after I was on a high dose of steroids. So you can see what a drastic change I underwent in just a few weeks of being on that medication. So beyond all these difficulties that I'm now dealing with as a 13-year-old girl, I went back to school after missing the first 3 months. And I kind of came back to find that all my friends had made new friends. And so everyone was still friendly, but I definitely felt like the new kid at school and that I didn't have anybody to talk to, much less to relate to. And I know I dealt with a lot of depression during that time, even though I was never diagnosed as such. And I never spoke to anybody about it, and I really regret that now. But ultimately, things started to get better. I got stronger and healthier. I was able to get back in with my friends. My disease was somewhat controlled. I would go for about 4 to 8 weeks of doing well and then have a bad week. And I continued in this manner for most of high school. But by the time I started college, I started kind of a downhill trajectory, and I ended up spending 2 weeks in the hospital at the end of my freshman first semester. And after that, I feel like I never quite got back to equilibrium. And I missed so many events during college of being able to go out with my friends just because I didn't feel up to it. I was supposed to study abroad for a semester, but I had to return home after a week being there because I lost 10 pounds in that time that I was there. I met my now husband in college, and he saw a lot of these ups and downs, including times that my joints would get so swollen that I literally couldn't get off the couch. And I moved out of state for a job after I graduated from college, but I moved to a much smaller area and away from the really good care that I was receiving, and I saw just the worsening of symptoms during that time, and this is kind of when things really started moving more downhill. But basically, within a year, I moved back and was able to get back in with one of the top doctors in my area. And despite having dealt with a number of symptoms for probably 5 years at this time, and including occasional hospitalizations, I remember saying to him the very first time I met him, I will take any medication that you want to recommend to me, but surgery is absolutely off the table. Fast forward 3 years, and I've gone through every medication that is out there, and I was still dealing with constant daily symptoms, and my doctor basically said, I have nothing left to offer you besides surgery. But instead of agreeing, I just stopped taking medication at the time to try to sort things out and was going to try an extreme diet change. And that was probably the worst idea I've ever made in my life. Because in fact, even though the medications hadn't been controlling all of my symptoms, I realized they'd been controlling a lot of them. And I got to the point now that I was so racked with joint pain and inflammation that I literally couldn't sit up off my couch. I had to use a walker just to get to the bathroom like a few feet away. And so I think I truly realized how sick I really was. And I finally agreed to go through with the surgery. So I was 26 years old when I had my colon removed, and I was given an ostomy. And let me just say it's been an amazing experience for me. And it was almost immediate. I remember after surgery, I had bought a bunch of puzzles and DVDs to just kind of like sit back and relax for a while. But I ended up redoing my bathroom because I actually felt better recovering from surgery than I had just dealing with symptoms beforehand. And I've had a really great support system in my husband and my family, but I still felt really lonely in making the decision and not knowing anyone else who had been through this. And of course, always in your head, you're like, oh no, this is something that always happens to older people, not to younger people who still haven't started a family and who just got married a couple of years before. And I think with IBD, I had dealt with it for so long that I had sort of pushed those feelings of loneliness aside and buried them. But once I was entering into this new condition, that loneliness really rose back up, and I really wanted to find a way to reach out. And of course, now the internet was much more prevalent and a little easier to do that. So I started blogging about my experience, and I reached out and I found some local ostomy and the Friends and Clients Foundation support groups that I started attending. And I also found a lot of groups online and was able to hear other people's stories, some that were very similar to mine and some that were very different. And that was really a life-changing experience for me to actually be able to tell other people my story and feel like people could actually relate to what I had gone through. And I wish so much that I had known about the community when I was younger. Because honestly, I don't remember if we were ever told about the programs that they have for kids with IBD when I was younger, but regardless, it was not anything I ever participated in. And that is something that has truly enriched my life now, and I'm so thankful for this community of people that I've been able to meet and interact with since that time. But having surgery really changed everything for me and gave me back a lot of my life. I started running half marathons. I've done 2 with raising money for the foundation. I went back to school to get my graduate degree, and I found just a much more fulfilling life with my husband, my friends. But about 2 years after my initial surgery, we decided that we wanted to start a family. And I've been very grateful that ever since my surgery and still to this day, I've not needed to be on any IBD medication. So both my surgeon and my GI gave me the go-ahead to do it. Just thankfully, I didn't have that complication of worrying about medication at the time. I knew that we could have some difficulties conceiving just because of the surgeries that I'd been through. But I just see we've been blessed with 2 amazing kids, and both of them were able to be conceived and delivered naturally. And while I'm so thankful for that, it's definitely not an easy experience. First of all, beforehand, I had a lot of concerns. What if I got sick? How would I be able to care for my kids? Or what if one of them got sick? And I still can't even imagine what that would feel like, knowing that I may have contributed to that in some way. But ultimately, we really weighed everything that we had before us, and we decided that this is the direction that we wanted to go. It would be worth the risk. And first half of my pregnancy saw no complications. But around 30 weeks with my first pregnancy, I started dealing with an intestinal blockage. And having a blockage can lead to extreme dehydration. And really the best way I can just describe it is it's just debilitating. It's basically would feel like my entire body was shutting down and I couldn't get off the bed. So I was ultimately hospitalized for that. And I ended up being in and out of the hospital every few days for about 4 weeks before the doctor said that they needed to go ahead and induce because they wouldn't be able to stop it from happening again. So I was induced just a day shy of 36 weeks. So I was preparing myself for potentially a long hospital stay and NICU stay. But thankfully the delivery went really smoothly, and I was left with a 5-pound, 11-ounce little boy who went home 3 days later. And so then during my second pregnancy, I was much more aware of these complications that could happen. And I already made a plan that at 30 weeks I was going to, really change my diet, make sure that I wasn't eating anything that I thought could contribute to a blockage. But unfortunately, this time things started happening a little bit sooner, and I ended up being hospitalized for 8 days. And that has been one of the hardest things in my life, is being away from my son for a whole week, being stuck in a hospital bed. And I went home with a stent in my ostomy to try to keep it from happening again, which made it painful to basically move. And so it was really hard to keep up with a 2-year-old at the time. But thankfully we made it through, and I reverted to an essentially liquid diet for the last 10 weeks of my pregnancy. And but I was able to avoid any further hospital stays and went into labor spontaneously at 39 weeks with my daughter. Being a mom has taught me so much, and it's made me realize some really hard truths. Because first of all, I can't fathom everything that my parents went through when they dealt with my diagnosis. And nor do I understand how they kept everything together. As you can see, we had 3 kids. It wasn't just me that they were having to focus on. I mentioned earlier some of the fears that I have, both for my health and for my kids. And I still get a sinking feeling anytime I see a diaper that doesn't look quite right. Or I get concerned if my son tells me that he's had a stomachache 2 days in a row. And sometimes I feel like I'm holding my breath, like worried that my symptoms might resurface in some way. And this is the reality of my life. And I'm so incredibly thankful that surgery was the answer for me. And I know that I'm one of the lucky ones, that it gave me back my health. But I do hope to pray for a day where no one else has to make that decision to give up a vital organ in order to attain that. I wish others understood the extent that IBD affects the whole person. First, the physical issues are so far beyond digestion. It can make it impossible to walk, and the fatigue can keep you from taking part in so many things. And then there's the mental and emotional issues: depression, fear, a loss of being able to relate to others or to open up to others. This reaches far beyond just the symptoms. So I may not be living with the physical symptoms at the moment, but I still live with IBD every day. We'll bring this.
Oh, is it me?
Oh, yeah. This is good girl.
That's such like survivor's guilt. What a story. Do I have pictures or is it just? Oh. Hi, I'm Will. Again, thank you guys for having me. Thank you for coming. And whoever's on the television or on the WebEx, thank you for being here. Yeah, this is me. As Michael mentioned earlier, I was diagnosed at 19 with ulcerative colitis. I am a gay man, and coming out was way easier than telling people that I had an IBD. Still is. Yeah, so it's weird. Maybe I was just like a lot more confident at 16 than I was at 19 or now 32. But I mention this because it's still a stigma to have an IBD, and especially in the gay community where this is a gut issue, and it's something that not a lot of people talk about still to this day. And I've been living with it for 13 years. So I mention that because I think it's really important to speak to it, and if we have any opportunity to speak more about it in any way, I will definitely speak about it. So I was diagnosed in 2005 and suffered with ulcerative colitis and all the fun things that came with that until 2014. If you know of any of the side effects or symptoms of ulcerative colitis, it is not pretty, it is not fun, especially living in New York City. It is not convenient in any shape or form. I knew my path to work. I knew every public restroom on every single block. I never strayed from that. I know, like, you go to Party City on 14th Street, the bathroom's in the back. If you go to Bed Bath & Beyond on 6th Avenue, it's right there in the front. Like, every single turn, and that's was my life for a long time. So to Laura's point, it's not just physical; it's very mental. Walking out your door and being like, all right, I got this. Can I get to the end of the block? Can I get to the next block? It's stressful, to say the very least. So, yeah, it's physical. Yeah, it's debilitating on your body, but it's the stress that is then, your mental stress then causes the physical manifestations of your disease. It's like this cycle that's just over and over all day long. It got so bad at one point that I never left the house until after 11 o'clock in the morning. So I worked. Thank God I work in fitness, and I was running a gym. So our gyms are open from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. I was like, all right, cool. I'm working the 11 p.m. or the 11 a.m. to nighttime. So I would never leave my house. I didn't feel comfortable leaving my home, which is isolating in itself. I have a dog. I have friends, and you can't do anything until lunchtime. So at that point, I was up to like 28 pills a day. I had 3 enemas I was doing. It was just this barrage of medication. I was having, I had injections, I had infusions. It was literally throw the kitchen sink at you to see what happens. Throughout all this, I lived in New York City. I was running a gym. I opened 3 more gyms. I taught fitness, and no one was the wiser, like, what was wrong with me. Like, that's post surgery, but no one knew. Like, I taught 25 classes a week and was able to kind of hide this disease, not because I was ashamed of it, just because I didn't think anyone would really understand, and I didn't really feel like talking about it. Like, I gotta tell people, yeah, I poop my pants 10 times a week. This is super exciting. It's not something that you want to tell, people who look up to you. So, I graduated college. I did all of these really cool things while with this disease, and like no one was the wiser. In 2014, though, it had taken a turn for the worse. I was living with a flare for about 2 years. I was on prednisone for that entire time, which, if you know anything about prednisone, you should never be on prednisone for a long time unless you are on the last leg of your life. And I was super swollen, and it was really sexy. And I started a diet, because that's what we always want to do, right? Change something super drastic. So I did the autoimmune paleo diet, and I was like, I'm going to blog myself through this. So I started a blog, and I was like, put it out there. It was the first time, it was 2014, I just threw everything out on the internet and like shared it with all my members, and it was kind of this breath of fresh air. Like, I was no longer hiding anything, and the people who came out of the woodwork, like, oh my God, I have ulcerative colitis too, or oh my God, was like immediate. I was getting like text messages and DMs and like all this, any way that anyone could get into contact with me. So we support you, we want to be beside you. And I was like, oh, cool, I've been, hiding this for 10 years, and now you have this support. And I would have never thought it was that. When I did start this autoimmune paleo, I was like, I'm moving doctors. This ding dong has me on prednisone for 2 years. So I researched a doctor here in the city, and it took 3 months for me to get an appointment with her. She's so incredible. So during that time, I was like, autoimmune paleo, and I was like, I'm going to go see Dr. Cheryl. Had a 2-hour appointment with Dr. Cheryl, took her through my entire history of everything. And she's like, cool, we have to do a colonoscopy so I can take a look. I'm like, oh, great. I just had one 3 months ago, but you're welcome to dive right in. So that was a Wednesday. She's like, stop by my office on Friday. I was headed out to the Hamptons, and she's like, 4 o'clock on a Friday, just stop in. We'll talk about your results. And she goes, well, we're not treating ulcerative colitis anymore. We're going to treat cancer. And I fell off my chair. And, set me up for a great weekend. So that was June 13th of 2014. A day I'll obviously never forget. And started the process of having my colon removed, which, if we could get into the whole piece of it is through surgery, and you have your colon removed, you have a J pouch created on your second surgery, and then you have a takedown, which is they just push everything back in. I sent Rebecca a ton of pictures of that too, but clearly they didn't make them work. I sent her 49 pictures and I made her pick 3. I didn't actually send her any of these. These are all. She found these on the internet. There are many. So, you know, after, and this is will come as maybe not a shock, but it is upsetting to me. I had not been involved with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation until after my J-spot surgery. It had never been, I had never been told about it. I'd never searched anything for it. Again, I felt alone, and I never looked for anything, but also the doctors that I worked with had never mentioned anything about the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. And lo and behold, you know, older than me, and I could have been, you know, involved for a very long time. So the first thing I did was team challenge. I ran a half marathon 1 year after my diagnosis, or after my surgeries, with another Crohn's patient. And it's changed my life since then. And since then, I've been working with the foundation as much as I can. Taught a spin 4 class 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks, whenever that was. I don't even know. But I think the points I wrote down here, points to make. The point I want to make is there are people who aren't like me. I've been in fitness forever. I've worked, like, I was in sports since I was like this big, and the impact of health and wellness and fitness on my disease journey, I feel like has helped me manage it better, or helped me manage it better, helped me definitely recover quicker through all of my surgeries, because I had this baseline of fitness, and I made it a point to eat well and sleep right and exercise, and a lot of patients don't even have the ability to do that. And a lot of advocacy I do now is like, try to move somehow, whether you're walking to your bathroom from the couch, do that as many times as you can until you can. So a lot of what I do now with the foundation is talking about trying to stay active through your disease. And to Laura's point, the lack of sexual education, especially in the LGBTQ community, I can only speak to the G part of that, but there's no sex education for us. I had to email I was telling, I think Laura this yesterday. I went to every single appointment with my doctor, with my boyfriend. He was there the whole time, through all of my surgeries. Never once did they bring up, oh, you guys might be having sex. Here's what you should know about this. So after all of my surgeries, I was like emailing Jennifer. I was like, hey, so and then it all comes out. Like, yes, you can. Here's what we suggest. And I'm like, this is something that I shouldn't have to come to you for. You should clearly know. So being gay with an IBD and not having these resources has been fun. I am now that resource for a lot of people. Actually, one of my close friends just had all of these surgeries. He's a gay guy in New York City, so all the questions he had, I just fielded them, and like, here's what you can expect. And I'm not going to pigeonhole myself to being like the gay sex educator for IBD, but here I am. Yeah, that's my entire story. I have no kids. I do have a dog that clearly didn't make the cut. The cutest thing in the whole entire world. But yeah, that's my story. So thank you guys for coming. Question? Is that for me?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, for everyone.
I think this is a great time for questions that anyone might have for any of us, any of the 5 of us, certainly Stephanie and Will. So we just want to open it up, and actually I'll stand because do we have an ability to field questions through the WebEx or not?
We do, there are none, right?
Okay, great. So this is the time where we take any questions, if anybody has any.
I do. So a lot of things on, so I am part of a site, healthywomen.org, and it's 30 years old, and the whole reason was the founder felt that women didn't have enough control of their own health information. And the thing that we hear a lot is, you know, you come in to see your doctor, you get what? Well, you got two hours, amen for that. But you often get, you know, you're jam-packed with your doctor. And so what can help people come in to ask the right questions, to get the conversation that they need to have with their HCP? So that's like, how could we help them help you, I guess, when they come in?
That's a great question, and I don't know there's a specific source that you can answer, but I can tell you as a provider, the kind of description that Will just gave for his experience, but with families and patients in trying to prompt the questions that we know they need to ask in the limited time window. One of the first sort of things is write down your questions when you come back, because we really want to address all of them. And I know that you have many questions that we're not getting to just spontaneously, so resources.
Yeah, and as Stephanie, well, I'll close with what the foundation has, but do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do. I would always go with a note. So I would keep in my phone, like the notes app, or just have a note of like what I need to talk to Dr. Sherrill about. And it would start, you know, I would see her for, 8 weeks or whatever it was. And different things would move up in importance. Or I would add pictures, like of my poop in the bowl. Be like, what is this? Eventually it came down to like I would just text her because we got to this level. But yeah, it's just keeping a note, making sure because you don't remember what you talked to the doctor about. Like I don't remember what I ate for breakfast, and it was literally like an hour and a half ago. Taking notes is what always helped me, and I would just pull up my note and be like, all right, Dr. Sherrill, here. Like she would just read through and be like, okay, yeah, cool, and then she would kind of pick what was the most important.
I definitely agree with that. I was going to say, I always try to do the same thing, that whenever a question came up, I would write it down then, because you get in there, and especially if it is like a rush time, it's hard to listen to the things you want to go through. I've also really started making use of the portals on the website, and granted, so many of these things you have to have positions to be on board too. But it's been really great being able to, if I have a question right now, but I don't have it, especially right now, I'm not going as consistently as I used to. If I have a question right now, I don't want to have to wait my next appointment. It's really great to kind of be able to submit things. So I would definitely recommend
putting those things to use.
I was very blessed. I think physician training is such a big part. Like my surgeon was so good when I came in for my consult that he knew these questions that I was going to have. He addressed issues about pregnancy and sex and raising kids and all of that before I even had to, because he knew that probably getting concerned of mine. And he talked to me through all of that without me having to ask. So I think that physician education is also a really important part.
And also utilizing the care team. So I would email physician assistants, because that's their job. They kind of field all of these things. So when I was like, I'd email Jennifer, that was my surgeon's physician assistant, but like I would just email her, and usually they'll get back to you within less than a day with any question and anything that's like not life-threatening or that you need to see the doctor about. Or she'd be like, oh, let me check with Dr. McCloskey and see what he says. But yeah, I think it's just having that open communication and not being so scared that you're wasting their time. Because that's a lot of it. We're like, oh, I don't want to waste their time with this. And you're like, no, that's their job.
This is a silly question. I'm sorry to ask.
Well, it's like I'm not going to belittle what a doctor does. Like I go to a mechanic to get my oil changed. I'm not going to be like, oh, but can you change my oil, please? It's like, no, this is their job. They want to fix your car. Your body is your car. They want to fix it, and you got to tell them what's wrong with it, right?
Right.
And the foundation really is here to help facilitate that. We have a lot of discussion guides already prepared on treatment decisions. The IBD Health Center is here to help a patient find the right questions to ask. Everything that everyone said, preparing your questions in advance, using your care team, using the portals, we encourage. And in addition, one of the things the foundation has is our IBD Chorus Network. And in the Chorus Network, the first thing that it's about shared decision making between a patient and provider. We have the patient put their most important question at the very top. The one thing you want the doctor to answer by the end of your visit That's the thing
Yeah.
that should be at the top of your question list, so that it's not as the doctor's walking out the door that you're going, but can I drink with this medication? That's the top thing that's on your question list. So I highly encourage patients and caregivers to get engaged with the foundation because we have all these tools that can help facilitate these critical discussions in those short periods
Well, and I
of
would
time.
think if you see the question, like, can I drink on this medication, it makes it a little less embarrassing, but I would like to know. I'd like to know if I could ask that question. Someone's already asked that question, so it's okay for me to ask that question.
The organization has a professional membership component to it, which is really designed to share information, keep up to date with best practices.
Yeah.
But I think we heard both from Will and Stephanie sort of vignette of moving to either relocating, in Stephanie's case, to an area where there wasn't someone focused on inflammatory bowel disease, or maybe starting with someone who wasn't primarily focused on inflammatory bowel disease, as is in Will's case.
Yeah.
There are some physicians that those are the only patients they see and provide care for, and others it's a very small part of their practice.
Yeah.
So patients educating themselves, taking advantage of the foundation resources in preparing for that visit is really helpful, particularly for those who are just seeing a few patients with inflammatory bowel disease. Remember, geographically, there are a lot of resources in New York that are not available in small towns in the Midwest or the South or the West.
Yeah. Could you be uncovering, those questions might help you uncover for the non-specialist that maybe it's time to upgrade, you need to find someone who's focusing on it.
That's why it's so important to be educated as a patient. And that's something I always push. It's about taking ownership of both the diseases of your care. That was a very hard thing for me, being a pediatric patient, that my parents were the ones, doing all of this and making most of the decisions. I mean, of course, like talking with me, but these weren't my decisions to make as a 13-year-old necessarily. And so once I kind of graduated out of pediatric practice, it was very hard for me to really take ownership of what I was doing. And I realized what an incredible difference it makes once you go in there, knowing what questions you want to ask and being educated on the different options that there are out there. Like when anosmia was first brought up, I knew what it was, but I had this totally different idea that it was this big crazy thing that everybody was going to see everywhere I walked. And so I was totally shut down to it because I wasn't educated enough on the topic. And once I actually educated myself and saw what life would really be like with all these different options, I had a much better time of being able to discuss that with my doctor instead of it just being like them telling me what to do and things like that.
Right.
I was only going to underscore a point that Laura was making about this program, which is called IBD Chorus. There aren't, and we've heard a little bit about it today, there aren't any real standards of care for IBD. There's no unified approach for treating the disease, and so you get a wide variety of clinicians treating the disease in many different ways. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is bring some level of standardization to treating the disease. And what Laura was referencing is at the heart of this concept of shared decision making. One of the things that's really important about IBD Chorus is that patients be directly engaged in their own care with the clinician the whole time. And so we have designed this physical dashboard that is to be shared between the clinician and the patient so that they're literally on the same page the whole time. And as Laura pointed out, at the very top left corner is what is the issue that is most important to you as a patient coming into this visit. And it gets filled out every time. And each time it may say something different or it may say the same thing, but it requires essentially that the patient and the clinician both be focused on that from the very beginning. And that's critical. Because to Will's example, right, I mean, he had burning questions probably for a long time that never got addressed. It wasn't being brought up by the clinician. It was hard for him to figure out how to ask that question. But this dashboard that sort of requires everybody to pay attention to this thing helps to facilitate that.
Laura, do you want to share maybe to Stephanie's point transition experience?
Sure. Yeah, Stephanie brought up the young adult patients and young patients and the fact that they may not be as engaged in the decision-making process because they have caregivers. But we do have resources that help educate the patient, whether they're a young person. We have a Just Like Me site for those 7 to 13-year-olds. And then we have a college website, which it really transitions the high school to college. And it translates all of our IBD information that is adult-facing into language using young people and college-age students to help us get the material into the voice, into the resource that's appropriate for them. It has videos, it has transition information. We partnered with the North American Society of Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition, otherwise known as NASGAN, and Improve Care Now to create these resources. So not only is the foundation working with our pediatric provider community, we're working with other organizations that support these communities to ensure we get the best information out to the broadest possible audience. So if you're interested, we can send you the college and the team links after this meeting.
The other thing I just wanted to add is any of the materials we mentioned, we're happy to provide to. Our IBD Help Center has everything stocked, so we're happy to take it over there. You guys can check out what's available. And if you have questions that you'd rather ask one-on-one, everybody here is available to you after this is over.
Okay. That's it for
You know, there's only, as we close, there was one thing that didn't really come up today, but feels important to share with you all. Because in listening to both Stephanie and Will's stories again today, I'm reminded that neither of them had good medication options many times throughout their journey, which created increased challenges. So the organization is very dedicated to bringing new treatments to market. And so we fund a lot of research. But what we did last year is that we also launched a clinical trials community, because we recognize that patients enrolling in clinical trials is not only necessary, but one of the largest obstacles to getting new treatments to market. There are frighteningly small numbers of people that are willing to enroll in clinical trials. So our clinical trials community was designed to help educate people about clinical trials. And Will, I think you have been in a clinical, is that true? You've been in a clinical trial, right? We want to educate people what a clinical trial is, why is it potentially really valuable to them, how do they enroll, how do they stay enrolled, how do they find the one that's right for them. And even in just the first year, we've had over 35,000 patients engage in that community. So it's a really nice example for us of the need and the power of helping people understand clinical trials.
And may I add one thing to that, Michael?
Sure.
In addition to the website with all these great resources and a trial finder, we also have just launched an ambassador program that's part of the Power of Two program. So we have clinical trial ambassadors who've been through a trial, who are willing to share their personal experience going through a trial, what it was like with another patient or a caregiver that may be considering a clinical trial. So that's another resource that we have to help make that decision-making easier.
Are you talking up the need for diversity in these clinical trials? Because that's a big topic for us.
Absolutely.
We need the women involved, you know, and racial ethnic differences too. It's very big for us. So.
Yes. It's something we all need to be focused on.
Will, did you want to add anything at all about your experience with clinical trial, or? You know,
I got the drug, so I was like.
placebo arm, right?
Yeah. No, so the doctor I worked with was in a teaching hospital, so it was there was always something happening. Do you want to give specimen? Do you want to, like, I mean, I have parts of my colon, who knows, and all these different things. So it was very easy for me to be a part of it. She's like, oh, do you want to do this? Or, hey, there's a new drug, or we can put you on this. And, you know, I enjoyed it. I love, you know, the guinea pig, and I'm like, please, clearly nothing is working, so whatever you give me is going to it's not going to make it worse. So being a part of that is great. A lot of people who are scared of the clinical trial are the people who feel okay, and they don't feel the need to be a part of it because are in their disease, and they're like, well, I'm okay now. It's been worse, but I'm in this like cool state. I don't want to maybe go to take this drug and then I go back to where I was. So I think that's the biggest hurdle probably that you guys see in getting people involved. In most of the clinical trials, you need to have a semi-healthy colon to be a part of this. Well, not all of them.
No, I was going to say, because I had the opposite issue that we had actually talked about doing the clinical trial for me, but we were too afraid of making the placebo and everything.
So one of the things that this emphasizes, again, it's in large urban areas. People have access to academic health centers where clinical trials are readily available. Treatment options are easier to come by in spite of the difficulty that we heard in Will's journey of accessing someone. Among your readership and your following across the country, the opportunity to have them think about the resources of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation when they're in isolated communities, nobody else they know has the disease, and they're seeing a non-gastroenterologist maybe, even for management of the disease, coming prepared to that visit and being empowered for that discussion is something that you really have the opportunity to bring to the patients that are in these communities.
So I want to thank you all for joining us today. I especially want to thank Stephanie and Will for sharing their stories both so beautifully. And as Rebecca has pointed out, everybody's available for one-on-one. And thank you again for your time.
And I also know some are staying for our next session. We could also offer a place if you need the phone or check your emails. We have a private space for you as well.
And there's a lot of food. Wi-Fi information up there. In terms of space, you can hang out here if you're sitting around for the next one. We also have a smaller conference room available if you want the one-on-one interview.
Thank you so much. Great. Thank you again, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks on the phone.